Hello everyone, welcome to the MOOC course of International Economics. Today we are going for module 8, that is tariff, and we will starting with unit 3. Now in unit 1 and unit 2 we have already come to know about tariff, different types of tariff, classification of tariff. So we are not going to analyze in details about tariff in this unit. And as a basic, what is tariff? Tariff is when we are talking about tariff means is a compulsory. It is not a mandatory burden or mandatory tax. It is like tax, but not it is not mandatory. Okay. So when a country export or import any commodity, any goods, so the exporting country or the importing country have to pay or have to exchange some amount of fees like excise duty, import duty, that will come under tariff. So we can consider it as a trade barriers also. Sometimes tariff are considered as trade barriers, tariff, and there are some non-tariff barriers. So non-tariff barriers we are not going to there. So let us discuss today about the various effects of tariff under general equilibrium. And in this general equilibrium analysis, we will study the effects of tariff in small nation or small country and large country. Now, before going to general analysis, we should have an idea about partial analysis. So, what is partial equilibrium analysis? So, partial equilibrium analysis is an examination of equilibrium and changes in equilibrium in one market in isolation. The problem is, by holding prices and quantities of other goods fixed, we ignore possibility that events in the market affects other markets, equilibrium prices and quantities. Doing so is okay for small markets like hula hoops. Now, what is general equilibrium analysis? So, in partial equilibrium analysis, what we assume? We assume that activity in one market is independent of other markets. But in general equilibrium analysis, it determines the prices and quantity in all markets simultaneously and takes the feedback effect into account. A feedback effect is a price or quantity adjustment in one market caused by price and quantity adjustment in related market. So what we come to know that in general equilibrium analysis, it is applicable to the whole economy, or it is applicable to the economy as a whole. Okay, that means demand and supply, it is balanced in general equilibrium. So in general equilibrium analysis, it studies how equilibrium is determined in all markets simultaneously, and even in one market may have a spillover effect on other markets, may be linked through demand or through supply, because output in one market is an input in another. So if we go for partial versus general equilibrium, the study equilibrium in several but not all markets simultaneously. Shock in one market has spillover effect in another market. General equilibrium analysis takes account of spillover. Unlike partial equilibrium analysis, partial equilibrium and general equilibrium analysis give different answers if spillover effects are large. So, partial equilibrium analysis, when we are talking about partial equilibrium, it is related to one variable. Okay, but when we are talking about general equilibrium analysis is applicable to more than one variable. So that is why it is important. So in brief, if we want to know why general equilibrium, so we have to analyze general equilibrium because to judge the effects of tariffs on the economic welfare of the tariff imposing country, we have to go beyond the partial equilibrium analysis of tariff. So if we see in the general equilibrium analysis, so here all these things will be included. Okay, the supply, rest of the world, spending of goods and services, household, the farms, FDI, services of production, factor services of production, factors incomes, goods and services, saving, investment. So in this aspect, the general equilibrium approach becomes very important in evaluating the welfare effect of tariff. So since in general equilibrium, as I have told you, that we include all the variables, most of the variables are included. So here, for analyzing the welfare effect or to evaluate the welfare effect, we require general equilibrium analysis. Now, effect of tariff. Now, suppose a country, it may be a large country, it may be a small country. So if it imposes tariff, okay, so what will be the effect under general equilibrium analysis? Effect upon production, effect upon consumption, effect upon trade, and effect upon welfare. So in general equilibrium analysis, a study is made of effects of tariff on consumption, production, trade, and overall we will study about the welfare. When a country imposes a tariff, not only a specific product or sector, but particularly every sector of the economy gets affected in one way or the another until the economic system reaches a new equilibrium position. So since here we have discussed that every sector of the economy, we are talking about the every sector of the economy. That is why for analyzing the effect of tariff, we are explaining about the general equilibrium, or we are taking into account the general equilibrium analysis. In this connection, Kindleberger, the famous economist, remarked that a tariff is likely to alter trade, prices, output, and consumption, and to relocate resources, change in factor proportion, redistribute income, change employment, and alter the balance of payments. The general equilibrium analysis of tariff is made from the viewpoint of a small country and a large country. So when Kindleberger have talked about the effect of tariff, so the tariff may alter the trade practices, the prices, the output, the amount of output, consumption, redistribution of resources. So it has an impact upon all these things, even upon the balance of payment. So considering these things, we analyze the general equilibrium of tariff from the viewpoint of a small country and a large country. General equilibrium analysis of tariff in a small country. So when we are taking into account the small country, the domestic price of importable commodity will rise by the full amount of tariff for the individual consumers and producers in that small tariff imposing country. So here, what would be the effect if a small country, if we analyze the impact or analysis of tariff in a small country, the first effect regarding the small country is that the domestic price of the importable commodity, here we have to remember that importable commodity will rise by the full amount of tariff for the individual consumer and producers in that small tariff imposing country. Secondly, the international price of the commodity will, however, remain unaffected. So when a small country is imposing a tariff, so definitely what will happen? Their domestic price of the importable commodity will rise or increase. However, the international price will remain unaffected. Besides, the divergence between the price of the importable commodity for individual producers and consumers and the importing country as a whole is of crucial importance in analyzing the effect of tariff upon welfare. So these are the effects of brief effects of the small country when tariff is imposed under general equilibrium analysis. Now, analyzing of general equilibrium analysis of tariff are based upon some assumptions. The general equilibrium analysis of tariff in case of a small country can be attempted on the basis of these assumptions only. So what is the first assumptions? Let us discuss about the assumptions. The trade takes place between two countries, say A and B. So when we are analyzing or discussing about the impact or effect of tariff under general equilibrium, so we consider two countries, say country A and country B. Let us again consider the home country A is small, the country that we are taking A and B. So A is a small country and country B is a large country. There are two commodities, cloth and steel. So what we considered? We are considering two countries, and two commodity. Two country is A and B. A is our small country, B is our large country. There are two commodities, one is cloth, another is steel, being exchanged between them. So what the country A and B do? Country A and B exchanges these two commodities, cloth and steel. Exchanges mean either export or import. So in our assumptions, we took cloth is an exportable commodity and steel is an importable commodity. World price of steel remain unaffected. So since cloth is exportable and steel is importable commodity, so another assumption we take into account that the world price of the steel, it will remain unaffected. If we go further, the assumptions, the imposition of tariff by country A actually upon importable commodity steel raises import price of steel for domestic producer and consumers up to the full amount of tariff. So what's happened? If country A is our small country. So if country A is imposing tariff on the commodity steel, okay, steel is an importable commodity. Steel is coming to country A. Now if they impose tariff, so what will happen? The domestic producer and consumer still raises the import price of steel for the domestic producer and consumer up to the full amount of tariff. It will raises. Again, let us take another assumptions, the revenues collected by the governments through tariff. So why tariff is imposed? One of the objectives of imposing tariff is to regenerate revenue, okay, is to earn revenue. And suppose after imposition of tariff, revenue has been increased. So the revenue that has been increased, the revenues collected by the government through tariffs are spent by government to subsidize public consumption such as school, health services, etc. So whatever revenue they will earn after imposition of tariff, they will be spending, government will be spending upon public consumptions like building schools, building hospitals, other health services, construction of roads, etc., etc. Now let us come to the diagram with the help of this diagram and taking the these assumptions as a basis of general equilibrium analysis. We will explain the production and consumption effect of tariff upon country A. Country A is small, okay, can be analyzed through the following figure. So this is the figure, this is the diagram. So in y-axis we are measuring the commodity steel, and as in our assumption we are taking steel as an importable commodity. In the x-axis we are measuring cloth is an exportable commodity. A1 is the production possibility curve, and P1, P0, all these are the all these are the price line. So in the diagram, if we go in details to the diagram, what we see or what you observe, the production possibility curve related to two commodities of cloth and steel is A1. Okay, so A1 is the production possibility curve of the two commodities. One is steel, another is cloth. So A is for steel, A1 is for cloth. In the absence of international trade, the point of consumption and production equilibrium is B. So when there was not international trade, or there was no international trade occur, so what we see, what you observe, we observe that the equilibrium point where production and consumption takes place is at point B as shown in the diagram. In the condition of free trade, free international trade, P0 is the international exchange ratio line and the production equilibrium point is E. So before international trade occurred, when free trade was running, what we see, what we observe that P0 is the exchange ratio line. where the production equilibrium takes place at point E. Now coming to consumption, the consumption equilibrium point is R1. We can see in the diagram that at point R1 the consumption takes place and that is in equilibrium. R1 that lies on the community indifference curve C2. Okay, so as we know that consumption related with indifference curve, production related with isoquant. So R1 is lies upon the indifference curve C2. In this situation, country A means the small country, exports F quantity of cloth and import R1 F quantity of steel as shown in the diagram left hand side. Now, if tariff is imposed but the world prices of commodities remain the same, the international exchange ratio line will become P1B1, which is parallel to the original international exchange ratio line P0. Now, production equilibrium shifted to B, where the small country A produces a large quantity of steel, importable goods domestically. This is the production or protective effect of tariff. So what we see, what we observe that when tariff is imposed by the small country, what will happen? The importable commodity, okay, that they import, now they are producing by themselves, and it is known as the production or protective effect. The consumption equilibrium shifts from R1 to R2 as shown in the diagram, where the international exchange ratio line P1B becomes tangent to a lower community indifference curve C1. So our consumption equilibrium shifted from R1 to R2, from higher indifference curve to the lower indifference curve. Okay. So what does it mean? It shows that tariff has caused reduction in the welfare of the tariff imposing small country. That means your consumption, the shift in consumption point from R1 to R2 signifies the consumption effect of tariff, which is lower. After tariff, country exports BD quantity of clothes and imports R2D quantity of steel. So the amount of quantity of cloth and steel they are importing and exporting are changed after tariff has been imposed. Thus, if we analyze this effect of tariff in case of a small country, so what we see, what we came to observe, we observe that in case of a small tariff imposing country, the import tariff has a adverse effect. Okay, so when a small country is imposing tariff, so the impact or the effect is not so favorable for that country. Firstly, since world prices of exchange commodities remain unchanged, tariff fails to bring about an improvement in the terms of trade for the home country A. So the first thing is that the TOT, the terms of trade for the small country, that is in our example country A. So there is no improvement in the terms of trade of the country. Okay, that is the first observation, that is the first finding or effect. Secondly, what we observe that although there is an increased production of import substitutes within the home country, yet the diversion of resources from the production of clothes, in case of which the country was enjoying comparative advantage and was having specialization, shows the misallocation of resources and consequent loss to country A. So second effect, what we see, what we observe that there is an increased production for import substitute, that is steel, importing commodity of steel in the home country, but their own commodity, the clothes, in case of own commodity, what it has been observed that the country was observing, the small country was observing somehow competitive advantage and having specialization on clothes, But due to this imposition of tariff, it shows the misallocation of resources and consequent loss to the small country A. Thirdly, what we can observe that the shift of the consumption equilibrium to a lower community indifference curve indicates loss in welfare for the tariff imposing country. Obviously, when consumption changes from a commodity, from a higher indifference to lower indifference curve, that means there is reduction in your welfare. Okay, so we know that higher level of indifference curve give higher level of satisfaction. But here, after imposition of tariff, what we see from the diagram, we see that the 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 indifference curve has been it has come down. So it represents the loss in welfare. And finally, another effect what we observe that tariff not only reduces import but also the exports of tariff imposing country. Okay, the reduction in the volume of trade is not only a loss to the tariff imposing country but also for the rest of the world. So it is not like that when a small country is imposing tariff upon the importing commodity. In our example, it was steel. So when a country is imposing tariff on the importable commodity, it is also having an impact upon the export of the commodity. That means their exporting commodity was clothes, so it will also be hampered. How it will be hampered? By the reduction in the volume of trade, not only lost to the trade imposing country but also to the rest of the world. So these are the basic effect of uh, general analysis of tariff in case of a small country. Now let us come to the general equilibrium analysis of tariff in a large country. So the assumptions remaining the same, whatever we have discussed. So if the tariff imposing country is large, okay, so what would be the consequences? What would may happen? The reduced demand for imports subsequent upon the imposition of tariff may reduce the world demand for the product to such a great extent that the price of importable goods falls. This is the first impact. And another impact is that the fall in import prices relative to export prices causes a change in international price ratio and brings about an improvement in the terms of trade of the tariff imposing large country. So if we go to this second point is very important, interesting. So when a large country imposes a tariff, so what would be the result? What may be the result? So if the fall in import prices relative to the export prices, it may causes a change in international price ratio, okay, and brings about an improvement in terms of trade. So what we observe in small country, there is not so much of improvement in TOT, okay, but in case of large country, when it is imposing tariff, we are seeing that there is an improvement in the terms of trade in the tariff imposing large country, and in our example it is country B. So when a large nation imposes a tariff, its offer curve shifts or rotates towards the axis measuring its importable commodity by the amount of the import tariff. The reason is that for any amount of the export commodity, importers now want sufficiently more of the import commodity to also cover the tariff. Under these circumstances, imposition of a tariff by a large nation reduces the volume of trade but improves the nation's terms of trade. The reduction in the volume of trade by itself tends to reduce the nation's welfare, while the improvement in its terms of trade tends to increase the nation's welfare. Whether the nation's welfare actually rises or falls depends on the net effect of these two opposing forces. So here the impact of large nation imposing a tariff can also be explained with the help of an offer curve. So our offer curve also shows that there is a increase in the terms of trade of tariff imposing by the large nation. So we will explain this concept, the effect of tariff of the large country by offering the offer curve in our subsequent slide. So general equilibrium effects of a tariff in a large country basically is to analyze the general equilibrium effect of a tariff in large nation. It is more convenient to utilize offer curves. When a nation imposes a tariff, its offer curve shifts or rotates towards the axis, measuring its importable commodity by the amount of the import tariff. The reason is that for any amount of the export commodity, importers now want sufficiently more of the import commodity to also cover the tariff. That is, to pay for the tariff. The fact that the nation is large is reflected in the trade partners or rest of the world's offer curve having some curvature rather than being a straight line. So if we analyze the effect of tariff in large country, if the country is not small but large, then when it reduces its import of the good from the world market, the world market price will fall. Okay, so when a large country reduces the import of the goods from the world market, so what will be the impact? The impact is that the world price will be fall. So if we see in the diagram, the right hand side, so this is a world market, the supply, SW is supply curve, DW is the demand curve, and the price earlier, the equilibrium price was PW, and somehow the world market reduces the import. So what we have immediately see, we can see in the diagram that prices, it falls from PW0 to PW1. Why it falls? Because with less import, demand by large country, world demand shift left. So this is the reason because why the world price will fall. Results due to fall in world prices. Now when the prices fall in the world market, so what would be the result? What would be the consequences? So the consequences is that domestic prices rises but by less than the tariff. Thus compared to the same tariff in a small country. Output and employment rises by less, thus the benefits to supplier is smaller. Demand falls by less, thus the harm to the demanders is smaller. Import falls by less, so tariff revenue is larger since import falls less. So these are the consequences. So if a large country is imposing a tariff, so what may be the consequences? What may be the results? So results may be in case of output and employment, in case of demand, in case of import. So in case of output and employment, the benefits to supplier will be lesser, it will be smaller. Demand, regarding the demand, the harm to demander is smaller, and import by fall, tariff revenue will increase. So effect of tariff in large country, again that is the demand and the supply curve. The tariff we have shown, PW is the world price, PW0 and PW1. Now after imposition of tariff, when tariff was imposed, our price line increases to PW1 plus T and PW0 plus T. T is the price, world price with tariff. And in x-axis we are measuring the quantity supplied and quantity demanded. So here first of all we are showing the effect of tariff on welfare. So in case of welfare, when we are talking the effect of tariff in case of large country, and when we are taking the case of welfare, so when a large country imposes tariff, the supplier gain, and the gain of the supplier is shown by this shaded portion, the green portion. But the demanders, what about the demanders? Now the demander loss, okay, the supplier will gain. When a large country is imposing a tariff, we have to remember the supplier will gain and the demander will lose. And what would be the loss? The loss amount is A dash, B dash, C dash, D dash, as shown in the diagram, the shaded area or the shaded portion of the diagram. So this amount is accounting for the demander loss. Only the supplier profit is the green portion, the previous slide we have shown. Now what will be the effect of tariff on welfares and government gains? So when a tariff is imposed, okay, so by the large country, whether the government is earning something, some revenue or not. Obviously, when a tariff is imposed, government will gain. What would be the amount of gain? The amount of gain is shown by the C dash and E dash. C dash plus E dash, combining both this green portion, the rectangle area, is the government gain. So what we see, what we observe, when a large country will impose a tariff, the effect of tariff is that the supplier will gain, government will gain, but the demander will in loss. That means in case of, in this diagram, what we observe, the government gains. This is the earning of the government or the revenue of the government. Now, effect of tariff in case of net for country, okay, or country gains from trade or not. So what we say, the country gains from tariff. Okay, here E dash, if we see this area, shaded area, E dash is greater than B plus D, the demand side and the supply side, and the net gain of the country will be more. So when a large country is imposing a tariff, so what we can observe, we observe that there is gains from tariffs. So if we sum it out, when a large country is imposing tariff, so there is supplier gain, the demander is in loss, government gains, and net effect on country, gain or loss, is shown by the shaded portion of the area. If we go in depth or in larger about the terms of trade effect, after a large country imposes a tariff, so what will be the TOT effect? So TOT effect can be shown by the price of export divided by the price of import. So a country's TOT is the price of its export relative to its price of its import. If TOT rises, terms of trade rises, the terms of trade improves because the country gets more import in return for its export. Again, a tariff by a large country drives down the world price of its import and thus improve the TOT of the country. The effect of tariff in a large country can be also explained with the help of a offer curve. So let us examine the case of a large country with the help of offer curve. So what is offer curve? Offer curve, also known as reciprocal demand curve, and it was developed by Mill, Edwards and Marshall. The offer curve of a country determines the relative commodity price at which trade takes place. It shows the various quantities of its exportable commodity of a country is willing to exchange for an importable commodity at various international prices. So offer curve, it shows the quantities of a commodity. It may be exportable commodity that a country, any country, so in our case it is a large country, willing to exchange for importable commodity at various international prices. So let us consider there are two countries, home country which export X and import Y, with the country foreign. In figure OF, the curve OF shows the offer curve of the foreign country, while OH1 is the offer curve of the home country in the absence of tariff. So in this slide, what we would like to show, or what we like to see, we are like to explain the effect of tariff upon large country with the help of offer curve. So in x-axis we are measuring the home country's export, that is foreign country's imports of commodity X, and in y-axis we are measuring home country's export of Y, that is home country's import of Y. The equilibrium is attained at the point A as shown in the diagram, where OF and OH1 is intersect each other. OF is the foreign country, OH1 is the home country. Now suppose the home country imposes a tariff, because that home's new offer curves is OH2 and it cuts OF at point B. Now here in this diagram, what we see, earlier the offer curve has been intersecting at point A. Now after tariff have been imposed, the equilibrium point has changes to point B, and when the equilibrium point changes from A to B, the TOT, terms of trade, improves, and it is shown by the ratio px by py of 2 is greater than px by py 1. Although tariff improves the terms of trade of the country, yet its effect on international trade is unambiguous. It leads to shrinkage in the volume of international trade. Hence, so what would be the main findings here? If the tariff imposing country is large, so we can conclude that the reduced demand for imports subsequent upon the imposition of tariff may reduce the world demand for the product to such a great extent that the price of importable goods will fall. And secondly, if the tariff imposing country is large, and in such a situation, the fall in import price relative to export price causes a change in the international price ratio and brings about an improvement in the terms of trade of the tariff imposing country. So this was for today's class. Thank you.